Hey everybody, this episode coming up is an interview with Alex Bovee. This was recorded back around Thanksgiving. So we had a backlog of great content that we had some issues kind of getting out. We had some difficulties with our production software. So been working to get that backlog out. So while it's a couple of months up, still a really great conversation. We still have more coming up. But as we get into the 2024 and this new year, we're going to have plenty of great content for you, new interviews, some stuff with just me and Samir kind of really diving into identity and getting excited about this year. So hope you enjoyed this conversation with Alex Bovee, and we'll see you in the next one.
If you wanted to truly deliver on securing identity, the best way to do that was to make it so the problems didn't become problems in the first place. And how did you do that? It's around life cycle, it's around governance, it's around making sure that users get the right permissions, it's about visibility. And so I think this is like one of the challenges actually with traditional security companies is they focus so much on just the visibility part. They're like, I'm gonna tell you about a problem. I'm gonna connect up to your environment, and I'm gonna give you this dashboard and show you all these alerts and things like that. People are like, how much better would the world be if you just solved the problem in the first place?
Welcome back to the Identity Jedi Show. Post-holiday edition. By the time you guys see this, it'll probably be like in the middle of the holidays. This is the first start of the holiday season here in the US. I am still recovering from turkey and football and doing absolutely nothing. It was gorgeous. Samir, how about you? How was your Thanksgiving break, man?
I'm just jealous of what you just said. Enjoying a relaxing break. I wish I could say the same. I went cross country, so that ended up being not as much fun, but I'm glad some people got to enjoy. I did call and bug you a few times, I think, just to vent, but it's good to see that you look relaxed. That's a good thing.
Listen, that's what happens when you go like multiple days without actually having to check a phone or a schedule or reply to emails. So
how do you do it? I just can't stop looking at my phone.
Oh, dude, I turn it off. Yeah, I'm dead set. I turn it off. Or I'll put it on do not disturb and I put it down because otherwise, if it's near me, like I have that, it's that phantom thing. Like, oh, yes. Somebody might be texting me. Somebody might be doing something. Let me go. And then whatever. And I was like, no, I'm shutting this down, man. My aunt and my uncle were here. They're like my second mom and dad. So I got to spend time with them. I was like, nah, man, screw this. I'm focused on the important stuff. And then there was football. I love football. So.
Awesome.
All right. So we got another special guest. Let's bring him up because you guys know what we do on this podcast. We have the best guests on this podcast. Like we are, listen, we're coming for that number one spot. Like, and I love the guys over at Identity at the Center podcast. I really do. But we're coming for you. So without further ado, let's bring in our special guest, Mr. Alex Bovee. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for being here. And I'm let me see. Is that the San Fran office that you're in right now?
This is actually the Portland office.
And we're
doing this in the morning, which is great because then nobody's in the office yet, so I can hang out here and talk on the podcast. It's not bugging anybody yet.
Awesome, man. Well, once again, thanks for being on. For those that don't know, you go ahead and give an introduction to yourself. Nice little quick background, and we'll hop into it.
Yeah, so Alex Bovee, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Conductor One. We're a modern identity security company focused on initially identity governance and really helping customers get the right level of access to their employees for the right amount of time through just-in-time access, self-service, access review automation, helping them stay compliant and so forth. And we've been in business for a little over 3 years. We're a venture-backed startup with some great investors like Excel and Felicis. And I can tell you more about my background, but I'll stop there.
I'll start with this, man. How did you get into identity, right? Because it's always interesting to hear people's journey, like how they got into this little space, right? Because it's a little niche.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never thought of myself. I actually didn't know that identity was like a thing until I got to Okta and I realized there's this whole ecosystem of identity. But so funny enough, my background was actually in security. I consider myself to be more of like a security person by trade. So I've spent almost my entire career at security companies in some way, shape, or form. And how I got into identity actually was by joining Okta. It was about 2015. And it was really, though, at that intersection of security and identity, funny enough, because Okta was sort of squarely in that SSO business, and obviously like cloud directory, helping, like federate user, bring on cloud applications and SSO users into applications. And they saw that there was this opportunity around security. They were helping customers solve. MFA at the time was kind of the big push. And so I was brought in to effectively lead like security products and help kind of put Okta's, like a little tent pole, if you will, around selling to security buyers, helping to build out security products. And so then that was how I got exposed to that world of identity. And I realized like, oh, there's people out there who spent their entire career in identity, and it's this deep domain. And to your point, it's a little bit niche in some ways, but it was really kind of cool to actually get exposed to that community then.
Awesome, man. Well, we're glad to have you. I'm waiting for the day, and actually, I'm not waiting for the day when I think about it, because it means that I'm even older than I want to be. But like we actually come across people where it's like, oh, well, I studied identity in college and I really wanted to get into this. Like, it's actually starting to get so big to where that's the case. Because most of us are just like, nah, I don't know. There's just this thing. And then all of a sudden I looked up and I'm the guy, and now I'm doing it. I'm the girl. I'm just in here. Like, right. It's just, we all kind of backed our way into this thing. Found like it's like this little side closet in the security hallway. It's like, hey, what's over there? You're like, oh, there's a bunch of cool stuff in here. So, but that's cool. I won't pick on Okta this podcast. I promise. That's going to be the next podcast. I love you guys at Okta. Seriously. Kind of, sort of. I mean, it's fun to poke at you sometimes. But I will say this, you have a real passion for customers. Like it kind of really, in conversations you and I have had, right, it really kind of comes out that like you're really passionate about not only just delivering like, what your solution is, but like truly for customers and kind of helping them, figure out their problems. Can you talk to us a little bit about like, where did that come from? Like, were you the kid like at 6, 7 years old walking around and is like, I'm going to go mow your grass because, I just really want to help, like, right?
Well, it's funny you tell that story. I actually was. I would consider, I did do that. I grew up on a military base. I grew up my dad was in the Marines, so we moved all over the place, and I lived on military bases growing up. And that was kind of my first like entrepreneurial gig, if you will, was just walking around, knocking on doors, seeing people wanted their grass cut. So yeah, but I would say in some ways, I don't know that I developed it through that specific experience, but I would say that I've always just really enjoyed that intersection of technology and problem solving, which is effectively the customer. It's where the customer lives. And I think that's why I was attracted when I first got into tech to product management, because I kind of see product management as the opportunity to sit at that nexus and to build. It's why, as I've been at Conductor One, I've really led the go-to-market efforts and some of the initial sales that we've done from a customer standpoint. And I love that. To me, it's just very satisfying to live at that nexus of where your technology meets a customer, solves their problem, and helps make their life better. And I think there's just something like very rewarding and satisfying about that. And I love it. I don't know how else to explain it. I really enjoy it. But yeah, I've always had that entrepreneurial kind of background. I think that makes me lean into that, if you will, lean into that nexus.
So given that you are truly a cyber guy, a security guy, identity is one component of it, and a lot of people look at identity as not even, well, they think of it as partially security, but partially IT, partially infrastructure, partially engineering, developer centric, right? Everyone's got a take, everyone's got an approach. What made you want to solve this problem? Was it your experience at Okta, or was it just generally like, hey, I see a big gap here, I want to go after it?
Yeah, this is such a great question, because I think this is actually one of the challenges of identity is it does live at the nexus of security and IT. And depending on who you talk to, those different teams might own different aspects of identity. And the reason that we leaned into, in particular, the identity governance problem statement and like just-in-time access is we really saw that if you wanted to truly deliver on securing identity, the best way to do that was to make it so the problems didn't become problems in the first place. And how did you do that? It's around life cycle, it's around governance, it's around making sure that users get the right permissions, it's about visibility. And so I think this is like one of the challenges actually with traditional security companies is they focus so much on just the visibility part. They're like, I'm gonna tell you about a problem. I'm I'm going to connect up to your environment, and I'm going to give you this dashboard and show you all these alerts and things like that. People are like, how much better would the world be if you just solved the problem in the first place? And then the alerts were like the 2% problem, like when something only went wrong is where you were looking at the alerts. And so we really felt strongly that the best way to actually secure identity was to automate, was to drive the workflows, was to improve governance. And that was the way that you were going to get the best security outcome. And that visibility is kind of a part of that. And it helps people understand what your product does. And, maybe you can do a little bit of detection but at the end of the day, I think I have this thing I like to say about like boring security controls. I think the reality is like the best security in the world is just implementing really boring stuff extremely well.
Okay, 100%. And I think a lot of times, when I look at all the vendors I've spoken to, right, when I was a CISO, is they want to show you the dashboard. They want to almost create some sense of urgency that look what we found, right? And your point is valid, which is like, I don't actually want to hear about this. I actually want it done. I just want it accomplished. I want it found, escalated, requested, as you said, governance, right? So good governance can lead to less noise. And frankly, I think CISOs are learning the hard way that you can't just hire your way out of this. You can't just keep hiring more. You've got to find ways to solve the boring stuff.
Yeah. And also it's like in buying those products, it's like telling you something that you didn't know before and scaring the crap out of you because there's this thing in your environment is fine to get a foot in the, I mean, a lot of vendors use that successfully to like get their product sold initially, but then they don't get used, they don't get operationalized, they don't add ongoing value. And I think you gotta like the automation workflows, lifecycle, like that's where the value is, particular on identity.
So I like this conversation, and I want to dive in a little bit here, because I think what we're hitting on is the crux of the problem, in that how do you show, like physically, how do I show the value of security or when I'm automating something, right? So Samir, you're the CISO. I come in and I create, this great, fantastic tool that's going to solve like all of these problems for you, right? So like, and I'm doing all this stuff in the background. And then when I show it to you, it looks like exactly what you did 2 seconds ago. Like nothing to you actually changed, but what I did at the background was like, hey, I'm going to make sure that, Samir has the right, access entitlements to get this. I'm going to check policy. I'm going to make sure that this is the right thing. Cool, it is. And oh, by the way, I'm going to grant him access, but I'm only going to do it for like 30 minutes. And I base that on like I can do all this wonderful stuff, but it's really, truly invisible stuff. So then when I show it to you, you go, all right, well, what's the difference between that and what I did? I just regular access for, right? And so we had that in identity. It's like, so now we got to build all this, now I'm gonna sound really old, this whiz bang bullcrap and just put it, look, all this stuff, blah, 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 here you go. Now it's like, you feel like you bought something. You feel like, oh, I've got something to show. When in reality, it's like, yeah, if I actually fix your problem, I'm not going to show you anything. Like nothing, like your process isn't really going to change all that much. It's going to be more secure and I'll show it to you. But for the most part, your day to day, like nothing's going to change. And I think that's the hard part. So how do we show that value in there?
Yeah, I was just going to add, maybe I'm speaking for Alex a little bit here, but I think there's a scale problem, right? So I think that with mid-market or smaller companies that can walk in and say, look, we do this anyway, and security guys can turn around and say, well, it's not really my problem. I gave the controls to the help desk guy, and he's taking care of all these permissions I need for 30 minutes, 3 hours, whatever, right? Or, hey, I'm spending money on 5 tools for this stuff, right? So I'm using, let's use some vendors. CyberArk for just-in-time access, which is kind of overkill for a lot of use cases potentially. Okta for SSO, SailPoint for governance, and let's add in a few more like AD for my directory services, et cetera, right? And so I think when I hear Alex talk, I'm thinking, one, he's wants it to be invisible. The second is he's thinking, when I go and talk to a customer, they have to be like, shit, I just spent $6 million on identity and I can't scale because I went from a 500-person company to a 5,000-person company. And everything I just built works for extremely manual steps for 5 different players to be involved. And I think that would be, that actually makes a lot. And that's why I think Okta's trying to build an IGA piece. And SailPoint, you and I, David, we talked about it the last conversation we had, that they bought a PAM solution. And so I think they all see that they're part of the problem, right? They're not helping.
Yeah. Well, I think to touch on the metrics and the tracking thing for a second, I do think that I don't think we're like totally lost there. I think the reality is it's incumbent upon your solution to tie back the value that you're providing to, the value that was sold effectively, right? Like prove the value either through quarterly business reviews or like ideally in the product itself. So you can kind of self-serve, understand that. But if you just broadly bucket, I would broadly bucket value into those two camps, kind of security value and then IT value. IT cares a lot about automation. So like, how many clicks and calories did you save me? How much manual work was there before? And how much automation is there today? And security is fundamentally about like, well, if you are actually delivering on that value prop of, zero standing privileges and making sure you don't have orphan accounts and things like that, those are things that you can track over time. So you actually can show that, I think, in terms of like the amelioration of risk over time, either in terms of like standing footprint of sensitive access or potentially like, account or identity centric problems like orphaned accounts or overprivileged accounts. So I do think that you can anchor on those things. And even though from a week to monthly basis, maybe you're not like driving alerts in in the customer's like SOAR or SIM, which is how I think a lot of security vendors think about their value, is like, how many alerts did I generate? That's the value that I'm giving to you. It's like there's a different way of communicating value, and I think it's about truly reducing risk on the security side and about automation and reducing time spent on those manual workflows for the IT side. And I think those are measurable outcomes.
Yeah, I agree that they're measurable outcomes, right? I think that we're still learning in, I think, the security space as a whole, but specifically in the identity space, how to communicate that value back, right? And constantly show that, yes, here's where your investment is going and here's what it's doing, right? And, I've said this before, we stuck to the insurance model and just kind of stayed with it, which is like, you just pay the premium and hope nothing happens. But when it does, we're there. Like that, we show our value when something actually does happen, like, right? But most of the time, you're just paying the premium and just waiting, right? Like, and that's cool. Okay. Like, yeah, it's a model that works, right? But I think it's even more sinister because at least with insurance, like for the most part, right? And I'm, talking about your casualty insurance, like, so, homeowners insurance, auto insurance, like I can shop around, I can change it if I don't like it, right? I can't swap out easily my security or identity tools. I mean, I can, but it's not just like I'm gonna pick up a phone call and call Geico and be like, yeah, tell me the best. All right, I'm going with that one. Like, nah, it's like there's a nice sticky little, 9-month, if you're really good and lucky, effort just to get that out and roll over to the next one, right? So you're kind of making a decision that, once you're in, you're kind of in, and so you got to be seeing that value, right? So I think I love that aspect that you talked about as far as like, the risk part of it, right? And showing like what changes over time, like you're making with these automations and what these security things you're implementing and how it's, reducing risk. I think, and I'm hoping that over the next, 2-3 years, we get a lot better as an industry at telling that story and communicating that and showing that, right? And then helping, right, our embattled, sister and brethren, the CISOs, like kind of go and tell that story to the executives and have a better standing of how you can kind of manage this, right? Because I think, that's the other thing. I think we owe it to them, right? That we need to give you something to help, make your job easier, right? I've been having this discussion lately about, should we take a look at the CISO role, right? And really like, have we defined it the right way, right? Like what's really important there, right? I'm starting to look at it more as like, hey, like these people need to be, probably less security practitioners and less technologists, not saying that they should know about it, but like, just think about what we're asking them to do. Like, and in some instances, go in and change the culture of an entire organization. By the way, you're the guy or you're the girl that's responsible for it, because if shit goes wrong, we're going to blame you. But we're never going to give you enough budget. We're never going to do anything to let you do it. But we want you to be the person like that. Those aren't security practices going to help them do that, right? That's communication skills. That's culture change skills. They got to know how to go in and kind of manage all of this and kind of sell that value of this is why this is important. This is what we need to do. Here's what's going to help, drive the business. Here's how we can continue to win together and do more things. Like, and I think we as both, the practitioners and vendors, like we gotta help them out. I mean, we don't have to, but I think it's beneficial for all of us.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I mean, one place I would love to see a little bit more kind of thought leadership from industry around is that actually at that intersection of security and IT that we talked about earlier, in terms of how do you think about what the CISO should care about around identity? I mean, I feel like there's like this transition that's happened in the last 10 years where, I know it's a little bit of like cliche, but like identity is the new perimeter, like it, but it really truly is. And it truly is in the cloud. And so if you believe that, and you believe that identity is the center of gravity, and that's like the right place to put, security protocols and primitives and detection and all that kind of stuff, how are we enabling the CISO to understand the identity in their environment, to measure and make that more secure, versus I think if you look at kind of just traditional security concerns for security organizations, it's like AppSec, it's incident response, it's kind of like those traditional technology spaces and sort of like in domains. And I think identity can sort of fall into it, but not always. And we just haven't really been, I don't think anyone's really put the thought leadership into like, here's how the CISO should think about identity, and here's what you should be measuring, and here's what you should care about, and here's what you should be reporting to the board on around identity in your organization. Makes me want to run off the show and go do that.
Well, I want to, what's your, sorry, go ahead, Samir.
I was just going to say, with Gartner kind of throwing out a lot of these buzzwords, right? And it almost feels like they're trying their best to get a handle on the pieces that you mentioned, but they're doing it in a very, this is way bigger than it is. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not, right? They have this term ITDR, which I spoke to a prospect the other day, and he's like, you mean IT disaster recovery? I said, no, identity threat detection response. And he's like, oh, I've never heard of that. And then ISPM, which I've heard from a few vendors now, I think it's identity security posture management. And then there's obviously CIEM, which came up almost as we're going to get rid of IGA as a quadrant, and now we're going to talk CIEM. I think that's what happened. Maybe I'm missing it. But what's your take on all of these? Are they just kind of like pieces to a bigger puzzle? Are some of them not valid in your eyes? Some of these terms.
Yeah. Oh man, this is a $1 million question. I could get myself into trouble here. I gotta be careful how I step. I'm gonna be walking on the landmines. I mean, tease it apart like a little bit at a time. I think that I think about it in terms of like problem solved, and I think part of the challenge is when you look at the alphabet soup of sort of Gartner and or vendors trying to kind of carve up different spaces and create opportunities there. A lot of times the reason that at least you do it from like a vendor perspective is you're trying to differentiate in some way, shape, or form from like existing solutions and sort of like, paint yourself in that space. But that may not always necessarily align to problems. And so I think I like to think about it from like a problem first standpoint. I think when you look at something like ITDR, the problem statement is we will detect identity centric attacks. Kind of like fundamentally that's what it's getting at. And I think there's, obviously you'd want to connect to your cloud directory or directories when you do that in different systems. I think that feels nascent. I know there's a lot of buzz around that, but I think a lot of people are still sort of figuring out where that fits into the ecosystem of technologies. And if that's something they want to invest in, is it really important? I think there's like a little bit of discernment still happening there. I think when you look at things like CIEM and even traditional IGA, there is definitely a visibility problem. There's a visibility problem of who has access to what and what entitlements do they have. When you look at traditional IGA, it's lifecycle, it's compliance, it's self-service. Like, those are all good problem statements. So I guess to come back to it, I think our view on the world is that there should really be a singular identity security platform for a company that really solves lots of pain points and problems. That's our vision. That's what we're marching towards. And I think that encapsulates parts of CIEM, IGA, you have to kind of understand the directory, so that you become a directory of some sorts in that case as well. But in terms of like how it ultimately shakes out with Gartner Magic Quadrants, like, oh man, I couldn't even tell you. I mean, the funny thing is, I think that the IGA quadrant was discontinued. I could have sworn it was discontinued like 5 years ago. And I remember the reasoning was like, nothing's interesting happening in this space.
Yes, that's it.
And then you fast forward and it's like, everyone's like, what are you talking about? Nothing. And like, this is not a solved problem.
I think you nailed it. I think that's a good way of kind of calling it out, is like, there's nothing moving the needle, so to speak, in the eyes of analysts, right? And to your point, it was not solved, but I think the approach I feel like Gartner took, and David, keep me honest here, because you read some of these reports or try not to, is that they almost broke the problem up into 4 or 5 different pieces and called it different things and said, well, IG is too big for us to solve, so we're gonna pick pieces of it, right? But those pieces they made so big to some extent, some of them I feel like, especially like identity security posture management, it just feels like a cop out to me. That one annoys me when I read it. ITDR, I can see the value for sure. And CIM, absolutely. I mean, public cloud is public cloud. I mean, we're still learning a lot of stuff, right? I feel like ISPM was like a copy and paste from DSPM, CSPM. I don't know how many SPMs are out there, right? I think we got to do better with that one. And I just don't know what it is, Alex. And maybe you create a new category, man, with Conductor One, right? And just and then we'll all follow your path. But ISPM, it didn't hit home for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it treats what I don't know with ISPM is whether or not the world will see identity as an asset. I think that's actually the rotation, that if you think identity is an asset to be protected and safeguarded in the same way you protect data and applications and things like that, then you can kind of, to your point, copy and paste like the SPM on top of that. But I think one of the biggest challenges around identity is the fact that it lives in both IT and in security. So like from a security standpoint, you kind of do view it as an asset. It's like an asset I need to monitor, I need to watch, I need to understand. But identity is like, well, cool. This is also how these are people. This is how we give access. There's a thing under the covers here. And so I just don't know if the world's like ready to view identity as truly like an asset and think of it that way. In which case I think the SPM analogy kind of makes a little bit more sense there.
So I'm gonna nerd out for like 2 minutes here.
Do it.
And I wish we had the rights to actually do this, because it'd be awesome. But so for those of you who are Marvel nerds like me, right? I explained this kind of like when Wong was first explaining the Infinity Stones, right? You zoom out and he goes, at the beginning of time, right? The Big Bang happens and it sends these different Infinity Stones like zooming out across the universe. For us, that Big Bang was Oracle deciding that it wanted to buy Sun, right? And what happened was, like, previous to that, Oracle went on a ridiculous spending spree and bought up every single identity company they could think of. Like, they bought like Thor Technologies, they had a like IDP product, they bought like a bunch of other these little kind of identity products that were just now starting to bud out. And we didn't know identity wasn't a thing, right? It literally was a bunch of IT administrators yelling at business owners going, I don't know how to do this shit. I'm telling you, I don't know who has access to what, but whatever, right? So then Oracle says, oh, well, I want to buy Sun because they wanted Java. They wanted the hardware. Well, at the time, why that was so important is because Sun had one of the leading identity products. They had the directory, they had identity manager, they had access, they had all these things, right? And so when that happened, between Oracle's previous acquisitions and that, like, there was nothing left. And so Oracle tried to go and put out like this big, huge honking, we're going to take care of everything from the database all the way up to the application server. We got it. We got you covered. Virtual directories, like everything in here, it's all yours. And it came shipped in like 15 freaking CDs. Yes, folks, CDs, those things that aren't coasters for you youngsters around there. Like, and it was horrible. It was a monster. Didn't work. Nothing integrated. And so the reason why I'm telling the story is it's that part where everything broke apart. And we said, okay, everybody go to your corners, right? So that's boom. That's the big bang. Everything breaks apart. The Infinity, so IGA goes over here, SSO goes over here, directory goes over here, and everybody, the Infinity Stones just kind of spread out across the universe, right? And now we're looking at this and going, Gartner follows suit. So they're creating all these different quadrants. They're talking about this. And what's missing and why we are exactly where we are today, which is why you have to know your history, because otherwise we're doomed to repeat ourselves, is that when everything split, we forgot the central part that connected all that together because everybody took off and went to do their own thing, right? SSO was like, I don't have to worry about like policy control and all that stuff or whatever. I just got to figure out how do I authenticate and log somebody in and make it easy. And then like, SAML, great. Like we're good, right? I don't have to worry about anything else. They didn't. IGA was kind of like, well, if you're going to do access management over there, great. You've got your directory over there. Great. Well, how are you going to do access requests? How are you going to use interviews? How are you going to figure out how this ties together? Okay, we'll take in that part. And we don't have to worry about how you get in the front door. Don't worry about it, right? Like you do that somewhere else. Now we look at this and go, okay, well, hey, identity really is the new perimeter. We're at the center, all this stuff or whatever. So now we're like, okay, when we start to pull all this stuff back together, like people are looking around like, okay, well, then we really need this thing. And like all these terms are starting to come up because we're remembering, hey, when all this comes together, there's really all these things that have to coordinate and interact in order to do these things, right? And so now we're starting to really realize, like, especially with something like IGA, like, what does it mean to actually put in a security control? Like, like policy actually means something. Like if I implement separation of duties within my governance platform and say, okay, I'm going to set it up to where you just have this, I also need to enforce it somewhere. I never had to worry about that because IGA didn't do any enforcement, right? So it's like, cool. I made sure that Alex didn't have those two groups when he submitted. I did it. I did my job. I'm done. Oh, wait, there's a second half of it? Oh, wait, the enforcement part, right? So all that to say now, as we're starting to see this come together and we're starting to redefine this and say, okay, everything that's old becomes new again. What if we had one platform? What if this all comes together? Now you get things like ITDR it's not a product, it's a discipline. It's really like, once you have all this, now I can start to, I can detect things and I can respond. Like I can make changes based off of these things that I pull out of my IGA platform, that I pull out of my access management platform. Like if I have it all together and I see a view, these are things that I could do. These should just be natural extensions of what a product does. And that's what we're going to learn that's what we're learning. And I think the market's going to respond to over the next couple of years is that, and we're going to get some of this stuff. Like people are going to make up stuff and figure this out because we've got new people coming in there trying to figure this out. Like, I think this is where some of the historians that have been around in this industry long enough, I think it's on them to really, truly become leaders of this and go, hey, not to be old man on the cloud or old woman on the cloud, yelling, this is back in my day. No, it's like, hey, there was a time when we did this and here's why it didn't work. So let's see if we have better solutions now, right? Hey, you're going down a path. I kind of know where that leads. Let me tell you some of the problems over there. Oh, there's better solutions? Awesome. Great. Let's go figure it out. Instead, if we don't do that, what we're going to have is people come up with new stuff. And it's like, oh, well, this is a new thing. It's called this. It's like, well, no, it's not. It's, and we get features that are shipped as products, which really should be like disciplines within a bigger solution, right? Yeah. But we got to mature, we got to figure it out, and then there's also capitalism and all that stuff or whatever. So we'll see.
Yeah, I love your I love your analogy earlier about the Infinity Stones. I would use almost here's another analogy is like cable unbundling and rebundling. There's this phenomenon that just happens all the time in tech of kind of you unbundle something and you get these best of breeds, but then inevitably things end up reconsolidating. And I think if you look at cable, it's been effectively the same thing. I spend more now between Netflix, Disney Plus, Paramount, HBO than I ever spent on cable television. And it's easy to complain about that, but the reality is that you have to kind of look at what some of the changes were that happened when things unbundled, and are you in aggregate in a better place? And so I think similarly with identity, we kind of had that like unbundling, right? From going from like 7 CDs of like a monolith of a product that took forever to get implemented and was really hard to use and things like that to best of breed products. And then we're seeing a little bit of reconsolidation. I think the reality though is when you reconsolidate, the thing doesn't look like the old monster 15 CD thing. And that's actually what's important is I do think that there's been transformations in the identity and security space over the last 10 years that the new consolidated platforms need to account for. Like I think decentralization is one of the biggest things actually, is that you can't have this mega team anymore, or a lot of places won't have these mega identity teams that are responsible for managing the monolith of all this stuff and change requests come into them. It's like we're moving to this decentralized world where you've got application owners and security owns this and IT owns that, and there's self-service. And I think that the way those products look and feel is just very, very different than the way it looked when you got 10 CDs from Oracle. And so I think there's like a bunch. Yeah.
It's got to be very modular. It's got to be, to your point, decentralized. And we're like, this whole thing has to be, we're back to SOA. We're back to service oriented architect. Like you've got to create a platform that you can truly give out and say, okay, application owner, here you go. Like, here's how you manage your here's how you manage your application, right? Go do this, go set up these things, and it's all on you. Great. And then you have that, they have their lifeline to call back in for help, right? It's like, hey, I don't really know how to do this. No problem. It's on the platform. So we have access to it. We can help you with it, but we need the ability to give you, right, your control to go do your things, but at least it's on a centralized platform so we can kind of get some standardization around there. We can kind of know what's going on. But yeah, and you have to be able to, and it has to be a truly modular system to where, I mean, I'm talking to customers, I'm seeing such decentralization where it's like, dude, these, like, basically it's companies within companies now. Like that's how they're operating. Yeah. And even from a business standpoint, like they're truly operating like that. And some have adopted this mind frame of like, well, it's for security purposes, right? Because if something happens to that organization, it doesn't affect us. And so we're good. And I'm like, not sure I agree with that, but whatever, sure. That's where you want to roll. But now, so then you have to be able to say, okay, well, I need to roll out these features over here to this group and not this group. Like and that's, I mean, quite honestly, I mean, that's SaaS. That's what SaaS is and wasn't going to. And so like, we're going to have to see this big evolution of how these products are even architected and designed, and we think about them. Because you're right. Like we're not going to go in and go, here you go, IAM team, knock it out. They're like, IAM team, it's me and like Jerry over here. Like, it's not freaking team. What are you talking about? Like,
yeah, well, I think actually you touched on something important there too, which is the time to value and the implementation. I think that's the also big shift that I see is companies don't want to go through these like 6, 9, 12 month long platform implementation life cycles to get an iota of value out of the back end of it. They want to be able to incrementally adopt products with like very minimal sort of like platform efforts, if you will. And so I think that's the other change in why the product space looks and feels differently. And even if you do end up reconsolidating back down to like a centralized platform, I think those platforms are going to feel different because they're going to be able to get you live with, self-service or access, like whatever it is that you're focused on, maybe first, second, third, get you live on those things faster. Yeah. And, not have like a 9-month long onboarding process with an army of professional services team, coming in to like help you set things up. So I think things are going to feel different. And I think even if things do consolidate back down at some level, I think those products are going to feel better. Like they're going to feel better. They're going to be more useful. We're going to have solved the problems of 20 years ago, I think.
Hopefully. Or not. We just charge more for solving the same problem. Capitalism, baby. All right. So because, and I'm this guy, right? We're close enough that I'll call this the holiday season. I'm one of those people that until we hit December, I don't really get into it, but we're close enough that I'll say this, right? So here's a topic that I'm throwing out to you guys, right? So this is for you too, Samir. What would be your holiday gift to identity? So I can make you Santa Claus of identity for a day, right? And so you have all of Santa's powers. You can just kind of create and manifest things and just make it happen, right? Let's take off the logic brain. We can just make things happen and go, boom, here it is, right? Show up Christmas Day, you come down the chimney and go, hey, identity, here's your present. Wrapped up for you. Here you go. What would that be?
I think Alex brought up this point, which I think is very important, is people don't want 9-month implementation periods or, go live periods. My Santa Claus moment would be kind of like a plug and play. I come to a customer, I log in, I get the key credentials I need to connect them to 10 applications out the box. Automatic mapping happens, automatic classification happens. 80-20 rule. Let me say I'm Santa Claus, but I'm not that good, right? 80-20 rule, get 80% there. And then the rest takes about 2 weeks of collaboration between IT, infrastructure, security to make those decisions, and then I'm off and running. That's my 2-week deployment of a enterprise grade identity governance and security solution. That's my Santa Claus moment.
Okay.
I love it.
Alex, what
That's
about
good.
you?
Yeah, that's a good gift for humanity. So if I was Identiclaus, I'm a man of the people. So I would bless the masses with beautiful user experiences that make all the kids happy on Christmas Day. I think that's the other part of that equation is, identity products have definitely suffered from poor usability, for various reasons. I think like the industry got away with it for a long time because you had that central command and control and central buyers, and like they didn't really have to make the rest of the company happy. But I think the reality is that security products have shifted to where like they have to be usable, they have to feel good. And yeah, I would bless the world with, I would bless all the boys and girls with super usable, beautiful identity products that they love to use.
I just want you to know when I cut this up and edit this, I am totally putting like a little hat and like reindeer going across with Identiclaus. Like, oh,
I like it. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Marketing gold right there, man.
Yeah, man. David, what about you, man? You probably you've got the beard for Santa Claus like me, so let's talk.
Yeah, and a little bit of gray. I'm not trying to call you out,
it's starting to gray out. So you know what I mean. I'm working on getting rid of the gut though, but yeah, it's starting to gray out here. So by this time next year, it might be full. Oh my God, if it's full white, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. All right, so of course I asked this question. I didn't really think about it for myself, but I think actually no, it's tied between two. But I'm going to go with I'm going to lean into the AI movement of it all. And what I would say is what I would deliver.
What AI movement? I'm kidding.
The movement of, getting fired as a CEO, then back, then fired, then back again, that whole thing. We'll talk about that next podcast though. That was fascinating. No, so what I would deliver is a true AI centric function to help. It'd be Jarvis for identity access management, meaning this, right? So you have a AI bot that you can interact and talk to for executives or anybody to come in and just say, hey, tell me about my identity and access controls. And it goes, sure, no problem. Here are the controls you currently have in place. Here's what's going on with these users. Here's what's going on with that. You can truly just interact with it, ask it questions that lets you know what's going on, shows you how what's been laid out as far as what's been provisioned, what's not provisioned, who's out of line, who's not out of line. And it's just there to interact and respond with you. It's like, hey, make identity great again. Make these more secure. No problem. Here are the following things that I'll do, right? And it's even got some nice wit like Jarvis does, so you can kind of talk to it, like gives you some snark here and there. Like it'd be perfect. That would be my gift to all the identity practitioners. This is a truly sentient AI that knows everything about identity that you can interact with. There you go.
I like it. That's a good one.
Fully wrapped up. All right. Well, guys, I think that's it. That's the show.
Awesome.
I like this. All right.
What would you, David? I got a question for your AI. You said, would you call it Jarvis, or do you have a?
No, I wouldn't call it
Jarvis.
I think Marvel actually has that trademarked. I don't know what I would call it.
Identiclaus.
Identiclaus.
I like that one.
Identibot.
Oh,
Identibot.
Identicles, like a Socrates, but like I'm ripping here. I don't know. That didn't really work. You know where I was going.
I know where you were going. Yeah.
I thought you almost said identity creep. So I was like, it's a creep. Creepy little identity bot.
Or Identitron, like an Ultron.
Identitron. I like that. Sounds pretty good.
All AI will not turn evil, people. I promise.
I know.
Famous last words. 20 years from now, we're just like, remember that guy? Yeah. Oh, anyway. All right, we're going to wrap. Listen, Alex, man, appreciate you coming out, hanging out with us, being on the show. Great conversation, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So you guys know what it is. That's a wrap for us on the Identity Jedi Show. You can subscribe to Spotify. That's our premier platform there. You can leave us voice notes if you so choose. Also, Apple Podcasts, which most of you, as I'm looking at the stats, you listen on Apple Podcasts, so you continue to listen on Apple Podcasts. Also, check out the YouTube channel, Identity Jedi Show, because we put all of this there on YouTube. You can subscribe to the newsletter at theidentityjedi.com. You guys know what it is. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. Love each other. Until next time. See you guys. Take care.
See you guys.